Good evening, YouTube. Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. Been a long day, and there's a lot to cover here. There's a lot of content I'm going to be making tonight, as it looks like I might be going out of town this weekend for an event, for a family event. We'll see how things progress with that. But in the meantime, I'm going to go over the severe weather threat because there's been a few big changes. We'll also talk a little bit about the wintry side and also the flood threat here. But let's start out with the severe here, and here's the big elephant in the room. This right here on the 13th, we have a very rare day 6 enhanced risk. In fact, I think this is the first day 6 enhanced risk in the Storm Prediction Center history for the month of December, which is crazy. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier in my post. You may have seen it, you may not have, but basically this area right here in the orange is our enhanced risk. We have areas just to the east of Little Rock involved. We have far western Mississippi, and then north central Louisiana, which includes the city of Shreveport and Alexandria. Some other cities of note would be Pine Bluff, Arkansas, Monroe, Louisiana, and Boise City. Of course, our slight risk, we still have Dallas involved, but I think that's going to be more of an early morning and overnight threat, or probably lingering over from the 12th, more or less. The more prevalent threat during the day will be areas just to the south of Springfield, Missouri, and then over towards Memphis, Tennessee. We will look at you guys heading into the late night hours, maybe overnight even for you guys as well. Jackson, Mississippi, you're in there as well. And then can't disinclude New Orleans just yet. You guys are outside of this line, but I do think this could expand depending on the timing of the storm system. But that's our big elephant in the room. Let's look back about a day, and oops, here we go. And this is going to be a late evening type of threat. I think the severe weather threat will actually ramp up into the overnight hours for this region. And this is where we're getting Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Norman involved. We have Fort Sill. Then this is my area of greatest interest right here, right around where Wichita Falls is. That's where I've been noticing a lot of. I've been noticing a lot more favorable conditions. I've looked at some soundings, and I think this is where our tornado threat is going to be greatest, is a little bit further to the south. I think conditions will be a little bit more favorable. The temperatures will be warmer here. When we get towards Oklahoma City and Norman, temperatures are barely hitting 60 by the time the weather event is expected to unfold. So the cooler the temperatures, the harder it is to get severe weather. Sometimes the dynamics can overcome that, but I'm not so sure about this area here. We'll have to see how things unfold. But anywhere around here, from Wichita Falls to Dallas, is of great interest to me right now. So let's go ahead and do some model comparisons here. I've actually been tinkering around with pivotal weather today, and this is partially why I've started this video so late. It's 8 o'clock my time right now, just in case you're wondering. But I found this right here that allows me to compare models in like a loop here. And this actually loads a lot faster than what I've been doing just a regular forecast loop. So I think I'm going to start doing that. But anyway, here's what we're looking at. Of course, my favorite map is the vorticity map here. And this is where our storm system is on the morning of the 12th. We'll move this along to about 132 hours out. This will be heading towards about 7 p.m. my time, so probably 6 central. And as you can see, the amplitude of this this little trough here that started. You can see our ridge right here. It's a decent sector of warm air aloft, but notice like when we start getting closer towards Oklahoma City, which is right here, right about this area right here, the warm sector isn't as prevalent, you know. So I do think that this could limit the activity or confine it, so to speak. The warm sector is a lot more prevalent right here, but even then, the temperatures aren't that high. Like if we were to look at a sounding here, like you can see it's only up to 63, and the dew points are only in the upper 50s. You really want to start looking more towards the 60s, towards the 60, maybe even 70 degree dew points. So not the most impressive environment. That's one thing to make note of here. And interestingly enough, of course, GFS has a little bit of a discrepancy with the timing, as the long range Euro and Canadian models only update every 12 hours. So, that being said, some interesting stuff going on here. We'll actually move this a little further because it's when we get into the overnight hours when things start to get really juicy here. The system draws in closer up, and this is where we start to lose the Canadian model here. The GFS and Euro are together at this point, though, by the way. And you can see that warm sector trying to build in a little bit further to the north. And I think this is what really concerns me right now is the fact that we're getting those warmer temperatures late into the evening and overnight hours, which could create a very dangerous situation where we could have nighttime severe weather, nocturnal tornadoes that'll be really hard to see. And it's been scientifically proven that the way if the tornado is visible, so to speak, more people will actually react to it. Like if you see it on a live stream, it's gonna be like, okay, this is actually coming my way. I need to do something. But when it comes to radar, people are a little bit more like, it might happen, it might not. I'm not worried about it so much. Don't do that in this one, because even though the 12th is at a slight risk right now, I won't put it past. I won't put it past the SBC to potentially upgrade this. I do think parameters are there, just not as much in abundance as the following day. But a slight risk can still be just as dangerous as a moderate or high risk day. All it takes is one storm to go into the right place or wrong place, depending on how you look at it, and then we could have a catastrophe. Let's go ahead and go back a little bit, and then we'll look at the low-level jet here once this loads. But notice how much faster this loads too now. About time I figured something out here, right? But anyway, we're going back to about 96 hours out. Excuse me. And this is what our low-level jet's looking like on the morning of. Note these wind barbs, the direction in which they're pointing, because that's going to be a key factor to the severe weather threat on the 12th. So here's where they're pointing. I would say winds probably coming in from the south, maybe south southwest, pushing north northeast. So we have plenty of low level energy here already, just well before even the storm arrives. We'll scoot this on to about 12 hours beyond this point, about 132 hours out. And here's where things start to get interesting. We start to get this jet streak that develops here, and this jet streak pushes its way to the south. This becomes an interesting situation once that occurs, because this is where I think the atmosphere will be the most ripe. It's just south of the Texas-Oklahoma border here, a little bit similar to the November 4th tornado outbreak, just potentially a little further to the west. All right, so here we are looking at the Canadian model. It's got a similar look. GFS had this kind of lagging back a little bit, but it seems like in the most recent run, we're starting to see it really start to uptick here a little earlier now. So about 7 o'clock around this region, we can look on a hordeograph and our sounding here, and we have our marginal tornado threat now. We have a storm relative helicity about 224 meters squared per second, more than sufficient enough for tornadic activity, and decent turning of the winds at low levels of the atmosphere. You can even see it depicted a bit here on these barbs. Cape is one issue though. This isn't a very cape-rich environment. If anything, there's very little cape to be had here. So this will keep the storm mode a little bit more discreet early on. But one thing I'm also concerned about is, and this could be actually a good thing, is if there's even enough cape to support these storms. I do think as we draw into the overnight, however, that's when things start to really pick up. Because look at this. Look at this jet streak that develops here. This will probably lend itself towards storms being a little bit further to the north as the system starts to roll through. But I do think that this will start to become a little bit more linear. We'll go ahead and click around this region here and look at that. Sure, the low level winds are crazy. We have sufficient wind shear. However, look at the temperature though. 53 degrees. This is not a cold core severe setup. So that's not going to work. GFS has the jet streak a little bit further north than that. But a jet streak does look like it starts to come in a little bit later, more towards the south. And it's around this region where I will be concerned more with a tornado threat. Again, marginal tornado threat. This time we're looking at a stronger storm relative velocity. But interestingly enough, it's almost like there's a little cap that tries to develop right about here based on this sounding here. But it looks like this in this environment, the storm should be able to hold up. And there's sufficient lapse rates at the mid levels, so I think all hazards would be possible with this. Again, though, look at this cape, though. Very low cape values, especially in the mix layer, which is really telling. I always like looking at the mix layer in particular because that can often tell you how charged up the atmosphere actually is. And like I said, there's not really a lot of it out there. But now we'll start to look more towards Tuesday's threat, and this is where things get interesting here. Start out with 12Z. We'll look at the jet streak that we have around that time and make our comparisons. Just waiting for it to finish loading, and look at that. This isn't even towards our greatest area of interest here, but we're already dealing with a 50-knot jet by about 8 o'clock in the morning, and this is over towards Dallas. Keep in mind, things start to pop off more when we get to about 150 hours out. But later in the day, this jet streak gets stronger. We're looking at now 60 knots, the low levels of the atmosphere. And for the most part, the GDPS, or the Canadian models we call it, it's pretty similar. Almost a 60-knot jet around here towards Arkansas. It's very concerning. The same can be said with the GFS. Looking at a lot of areas where we're getting into the upper 50-knot and some places even 60-knot territory. So this is definitely something that has to be watched extremely close. So we'll move this one more scan over to OOZ. It's about 130. This is about 132 hours out according to the Euro. And this jet streak pushes its way through Arkansas into Mississippi. So I think we'll get a little bit of everything. There could be some discrete cells early, and then this will start to become more of a linear threat. But I do think there is a very high damaging wind threat with this as well. We'll run this next scan here. Oh, no, I didn't want to do that. I did not want to do that. Computer's doing weird things again. We'll run the next scan here. We'll go to about 162 hours out. And it's pretty much a similar look. But by this point, the environment is going to start to become a lot less favorable as we head into Wednesday. I wouldn't rule out the potential for a slight risk to be issued, but I think the biggest day will be, of course, Tuesday. I'm going to use a sounding more towards my area. I'm over towards Atlanta. Looking at around this time, I saw the forecasted high being around 50 something, lows around 40s. Look at that. Yeah, no way. I don't see any chance of there being any sort of severe weather past Alabama, I would say. And that's honestly a stretch at this point. So that's going to be the main severe threat that we're dealing with here. Go ahead and look at one other thing real quick before we move on. We're going to look at the surface dew points, and that's a key factor in severe weather development as well. So let's go ahead and look around peak time, which would be about, I'd say, OOZ, which would be about 7, 8 o'clock on, what was it, Monday? Yeah, it was Monday. So here we are right here. This is our point of interest. Start to go towards the late evening hours into the overnight. Again, look at that though. The dew points aren't super rich until we get, I really would say, until the overnight hours. And I think again, this is where I'm definitely concerned about an overnight type threat. This is when we get towards Dallas. This is a I would say maybe, trying to do the math in my head, about 1 or 2 in the morning. Marginal tornado threat, 64-degree temperature, 63-degree dew points. These two are practically right on top of each other. This tries to form a cap, but I don't think it's going to matter at this point. Should be enough lift from the storm system to break any cap that tries to develop, I would say, as it pushes off to the north. But all the models are pretty much in agreement at this point here. Then let's move on to Tuesday, about 12Z, which would be 144 hours out. We're going a little slower. So far, it looks like our moisture is going to be mainly hanging back towards Texas starting out. But I think as we move towards 18Z or OOZ, I would say actually, another 12 hours, we're mainly looking at Louisiana for having the richest dew points. I think an area just a little bit further to the north of that is going to be of great interest as well. Take our first sounding, and lo and behold, here we are. Look at look at that probable hazard type tornado. Dew points and temperatures right on top of each other. Not the best lapse rates at the mid levels of the atmosphere, I will say that. But look at this storm relative helicity, 464 meters per second squared. So I know this isn't pulling up anything on the significant tornado parameter. Normally, this doesn't end up being the case, considering the fact that, during about this time, where we're looking about 5+ days out, you're not really going to see anything yet. Usually, about 3 days out is when you start really getting into the nitty gritty as far as stuff like CAPE and other variables, so to speak. Dew points is probably one of the few things we can start to look at right now. And that's the irritating thing about storm systems like this sometimes. But look what happens as we start to get into the overnight on Tuesday. We start to lose some of these really rich dew points. They'll hang around further to the south. And I think that's where our tornado potential will still be the highest. But even then, we're starting to fall off on that just a little bit. And then once we move this about another 12 hours, we get towards 18Z on Wednesday. Dew points will probably be decent, but not going to be anywhere near sufficient enough to produce severe weather around areas like Birmingham, Atlanta, etc. Maybe further towards the south, conditions could be favorable, but I'm not really. Oh, there we go. Look at that. We do have a little something right here. We have a marginal tornado threat, decent storm relative felicity, decent lapse rates as well. So this will be something to watch. I mean, I'm not ready to say that we should put out a day 7 slight risk, because there is some discrepancy in the models here, but not much. But the parameters aren't in such abundance to where it's like, okay, we need to start talking about this right now. But we will be watching it, though, of course. But of course, that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what the radar will look like over these next few days. So here we are looking at the morning of the 12th. And it's when we get into the overnight hours, that's when our storms really start to fire off here. There's no real indicators of super discrete supercells or anything really dangerous here. Looked at a little kidney bean here, but look at the temperature right here, the dew points. As of right now, nothing looks concerning with that. But I do expect a line to develop and probably go through Oklahoma City in the early morning hours, and that'll be the end of your severe threat. Could be a few cells that pop out ahead of this that might need to be of concern over towards eastern Oklahoma. But beyond that, I'm not really concerned. Even then, the environment over in this region just isn't sufficient enough yet for severe weather. We push this further along, things do start to get a little bit more interesting. You do see this line of storms develop here. It's probably looking more like a QLCS, but there are a lot of pop-ups that develop out ahead of this, and these are going to be the ones that we'll need to watch for potential for tornadoes. Not the greatest storm relative felicity with this, but we'll still have to watch this because remember, we're 5 to 6 days out on this event. And of course, as I mentioned before, as we get into the overnight hours, this becomes almost a completely linear threat, then eventually a heavy rain threat, and we go on from that point. Then also, interestingly enough, when we go through this precip model, get snow on the backside of this for some of the areas that we're looking at heavy rain and potentially even some severe weather a couple of days earlier, which is interesting as well. And then, of course, we have to look at the potential for our coastal low. And this did make a trend where we were pushing a little bit more towards the coast than before. We were kind of hanging a little bit north of New York now. Now it's almost like that low has gone right over New York, and it has a little bit more cold air to work with, or at least as far as the Euro is concerned, it does. Make our comparison to the GFS, it's a little bit different. Oops, wrong button. So the GFS on here is a little bit harder to work with. Doesn't show the same kind of high definition that the pivotal weather site does. But you can see showers, thunderstorms. A few of those could be severe. In all likelihood, a few will. But it's a pretty similar look actually. Maybe a little less snow with the GFS. Probably some questions in regards to moisture. But you can definitely see by this 540 line here, after these storms pass, you start wraparound moisture and some cold air feeding in behind it. And for some areas around the Appalachians, eastern Kentucky, maybe even eastern Tennessee even, could see a few snow showers, some snow flurries. And then we will watch this system work its way to the northeast. GFS still has this kind of lingering a bit more inland, but it has taken a slight jog a little bit more towards the coast now. But with the GFS, it looks like areas like New York City, it looks like you might see rain for almost the entire time. Maybe not even seeing snow at all. So that's going to be fun to forecast. You got to love nor'easters like that because you won't really, that's going to really be more of a nowcast situation, if anything. All right, so let's do our comparison of the snowfall with all the models. Euro's a little bit more aggressive. I did say the Euro seemed like it was a little bit colder, had more moisture. So more areas around Kentucky could get more snow. Some areas could even see about 1 to 2 inches in some spots. Maybe even a scattered area of 3 to 4 inches. And the bigger totals, of course, are going to be more over towards the northeast. We already know about our blizzard situation right here. We know how strong the winds are going to be in this region. So again, if you're seeing this video and you happen to live in North Dakota, South Dakota, now is probably a good time to get your supplies. Don't wait because you may not get a chance to get them. But this is an interesting area right here too as well. Just thought I'd give you a heads up. For you guys, I wouldn't buy any bread and milk. This is nothing you haven't dealt with before. Not to mention the snowfall totals aren't going to be that great. Road conditions might be a little bit rough though. Not going to lie with that. But let's go ahead and quickly look at the precipitation and wrap up this video here, because there's going to be a couple of videos I pre-record as again there's a pretty high likelihood that I'll be out of town. So we'll start out by looking at the euro here. And we're mainly going to be looking towards these regions for the heaviest of rain. There's scattered pockets over towards northeastern Texas where we could see about maybe 2, maybe even 3 inches. I thought I just saw 3 over an area I just went over. Yeah, and then Louisiana looks like they're going to be the big winner right here. There could be some spots that get up to about 5. I even saw 6 inches right here. And then there's going to be a nice little swath of rain that pops up around here, around this part of the southeast. And this will be what affects Birmingham, Atlanta, Georgia, and through most of Mississippi as well. I think Jackson will be involved in that too. But anywhere in these little small areas, we have storms training over each other one after the other. We could get easily up to 3 to 5 inches easily. We've had several rainstorms come through this region over the last few days, so the ground's already taking in a lot of moisture. It'll be questionable as to how much more it can handle before we start seeing potentially some flooding. But yeah, there's a lot going on with this here. It's going to be a handful to track, but I might be able to do an update tomorrow morning or a weekend forecast or something. But beyond that, that's the end of the video here. I'm exhausted. I'll see you guys in the next one. If you liked anything I did in this video, definitely drop a like. Share this video to anyone that might be in the affected areas. And of course, if you haven't subscribed already, definitely do so. I'll just go ahead and say it. Might as well try to get to 150 by the end of the year. Would be nice. You guys have already smashed it for this year. I wasn't even expecting to get 100 subs, let alone 130. So thank you guys for that. But anyway, enough rambling for me. This has been Metalhead Weatherman. You guys have a good night. I'll see you soon.